Delegation is not just about getting tasks off your plate. It's a leadership skill. It is a capacity building tool. And maybe most importantly, it is a trust exercise. But for a lot of leaders, delegation brings up real tension. You know you can't do everything yourself, but handing something else off can feel risky. Will it be done the right way? Will the standard drop? Will it take longer to explain than just to do it myself? In today's episode, we are talking about when to delegate. How do you know when it's time to let go of a task, project, or decision? Or how do you delegate in a way that builds ownership, protects quality, and keeps you from feeling like you've lost control? Because a great delegation is not abdication, it's not dumping work, it is a deliberate leadership move that helps your team grow while freeing you to focus on the daily work you can do.
Good afternoon. How's it going?
I'm doing great. I love your sweater. You remind me for some reason, it's like this 80s look, and you remind me of like the dirty dancing girl for some
Ooh,
reason.
I like it. You wanna know what's super funny is here I am, like, with tea and a sweatshirt, feeling like it's, like, wintertime, and it's probably let's see, actually, I can tell you oh, no, it's not gonna tell me. It's probably, like, 105 degrees outside right now where I'm at, but I'm in the AC, and it is what it is, and I had, like, a tank top on, and I'm like, "I am not gonna freeze while we do this," so but Dirty
It
Dancing, I will take
rains.
it.
Yeah, I know, she's awesome. Um, it rained here kind of, most of the weekend, so I'm kind of still in, like, a cozy mood, and it's only 80, here, so it's a lot hotter
It's
where you're at.
only 80. That would be glorious. You know, funny story for this weekend. I have a I wouldn't call her a friend. I wouldn't not call her a friend. We go to the same church. We've had a couple like passings and we know a
Acquaintance.
lot of mutual friends.
Uh-huh.
And, she was in Fort Collins, and so I said something like, "Oh, I was just there. I have a really good friend there." And come to find out, like, she is, like, from there. I don't know if she was born there,
Oh,
but
wow.
raised there, like, went to high school there and all of the things. So, I'm not gonna name drop her here, but I forgot, like, before our pre-record, I have to share her name with you to see if you,
Totally.
like, maybe
Yes.
know her.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, funny. Small world, small world.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, today we are talking about a topic that I know you'll be very excited about. This is a topic that is painful for me in the fact that I fail at this fail at this skill very often, and don't ask for help when it's time. So
Mhm.
I'd love to dig in. We've touched on this in several of our prior podcast episodes, just in passing, but I'd really like to kind of drill in and talk about, what does it look like? When are good signs that you should delegate, the type of work that you should not delegate, and kind of the best ways, if you are relinquishing that control, what are the ways that you approach that delegation so you know that your product won't suffer? So
Mhm.
I'm excited to dig in because I think we're both going to learn something, and I always I have always good takeaways after our conversations and things that I start applying in my life as well. So
Yay.
without further ado, let's dig in.
Let's dig in. I do. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of delegation. I'm a huge fan of delegation when done the right way. So I'm
Hmm.
excited to get into like what real, thoughtful, strategic delegation looks like.
Indeed. Alrighty. Well, let's first kind of jump in super high level. So let's reframe delegation. So delegation, is sometimes it's mislabeled, and maybe sometimes appropriately labeled when it's misused.
Hmm.
But delegation is sometimes misunderstood as dumping your work on somebody,
Hmm.
or admitting that you're not superwoman or superman, admitting that you're overwhelmed. Giving away responsibility is another misconception, or something that only executives do, for
Mhm.
their personal assistant or something like that. Um, but really, the better definition for delegation is assigning ownership of a task, a decision, or a process to the right person with the right support. And I want to hone in on the right support here because one of the takeaways that I remember learning from my husband when, asking him like for help with delegating,
Mhm.
and he brought up a good point about, um, when you might have a task that you just have to you do recurringly, whether it's monthly or quarterly or annually, and it's a bugaboo, but you're kind of responsible for it, and you do this thing kind of at a surface level, but what you might find out is like, well, you're just doing something on a super surface, kind of the most burning
Mhm.
thing because, you don't have the bandwidth to own this thing. So he really made me look at delegation from a different lens because when I can delegate a certain task to somebody, they're not just taking, this, 30-minute task that I do quarterly or whatever, but now they own this whole topic to a degree that I could have never done on my own and really shine themselves. So,
Mhm.
that's kind of the honing in on the right person with the right support.
Yeah, I'll actually jump in a little bit because if I remember correctly, one of your um one of your pieces of feedback was they wished that we disagreed more. So here's your little moment of
Let's do it.
disagreement. So I almost fully agree with your bullet points on delegation being misunderstood. The one that I am going to give some pushback on is admitting when you're overwhelmed. And
Mhm,
the reason that I'm giving pushback on that is because I have seen so many leaders, including myself, and delegation is not something that's easy for me. This is actually one of my major weaknesses and biggest pain points for
mhm,
the people around me is that they wish that I delegated more. And so I think that admitting that you're overwhelmed is a huge strength. And I've learned that over the course of the last year specifically in when you admit it, it's not a weakness, and delegating it to someone else, you may be the resource to get something kickstarted, but you don't necessarily need to be seeing it from point A to point B. And a perfect example of this is you and I talked pre-show about like how chaotic my life is, and I have no one to
mhm.
blame but myself. Like I have put myself in this chaotic mess because my toxic trait is I cannot say no to things and I am passionate about everything that I do. And so over the weekend I was checking in on a friend who's going through, some difficult family stuff,
Mhm.
and she actually lives here. She's up about 4 hours north of me with her dad who is in transition, if you will. And I checked in on her just to see how she's doing. She's another one of those women that's just a superwoman. Like she does it all, never admits weakness. You look at her and you're like, how do you have your shit together all the time? Like, can I have a piece of this like superpower that you have? So I checked in on her and just, asked, is there anything I can do? And she said, actually, as a matter of fact, if you know anyone that is coming from north to south, south to north, whatever, I'd love to be connected with them because I'm up here for longer than I had ever anticipated for. My my plants need to be watered. My house is kind of sitting idle. I need to get my garage door opener down to someone down there that's willing to take care of the home. And obviously I'm not driving 4 hours north because I am not that kind of friend. But I started, like, putting out the feelers, like, I know so many people, my connections know so many people and started putting that out there. Um, and so I delegated this. I found someone else that could do it, delegated it, got it done, and this is just very insignificant, not related to business, but I couldn't do it. I have enough-ish on my plate, but
Mhm.
my pushback is admitting that you're overwhelmed and giving something away. A lot of times, the things that stack up on your plate are because you don't know how to say no. You are unwilling to say no. Or
Mhm.
to your point, you have that feeling of no one can do it as good as me. And so
Mhm.
we hold way more than we should, which then creates this overwhelmedness. And so I agree it is not dumping work. I agree that it's not giving away responsibility. I agree that it is something that everyone needs to know how to do, executive level or not. But I do have some pushback on it being something uh, delegation is something you can use when you are in an overwhelmed state.
Agreed. Agreed.
But with that, I will transition into kind of the other things. Signs that you should delegate. There are bottlenecks. If you start to see processes slow down, or you see that I see this all the time in the finance world. And one client specifically that I'm working with right now, he knows he's the bottleneck because he's the one that has to get the access. And so
Mhm.
there's not really a way to delegate. But the question for him is, what can you delegate so that you can get this done, or how do we make this a priority, which then led into some delegation. um Things that you wait on to review, approve, or execute. And this is a perfect opportunity to kind of rewind back to quite a few episodes ago. I brought in the fact of the Jahari window, and I still use
Mhm.
this in my I use it about quarterly. I kind of review like what's on my plate. What do I love to do? What am I good at? What do I not love to do but I'm good at? What do I hate to do and I'm not good at? And what do I hate to do but I'm good at? And you
Mhm.
start to prioritize what you should be doing and where you should be spending your time. And the Johari window theory is that you should be spending 80+% of your time in that things that I love to do and that I'm good at. You should really be spending zero time in the things that you don't like to do and you're not good at. That's a great place to start for delegation. And it usually are those things that are waiting on your desk that you don't want to do, or you're not good at, or you're not efficient with your time with them. Repeated tasks. We could probably do like an actual a full episode on automation.
Yes.
When you are repeating tasks over and over and over and over again, I think the first thing that you can do is kind of pass it along to someone else and see if they can create efficiencies, or start to look at how can you automate this process. Um, but I definitely think that's something we could do uh, a full episode on.
Yeah. I
Someone
agree.
else can do it 70 to 80% as well as you, or even better. Again, you and I have talked about this so frequently. And my way is not the only way. Your way is not the only way. And a lot of things that I've done in my career that I've passed along ended up having a better process after I passed it along, because they
Mhm.
were people that were either in the weeds doing it already, or they were a fresh perspective coming in on, why are you doing this way? And the
Mhm.
response kind of was, well, we've always done it this way. Um, that 30 to that 20 to 30% that they may be lacking is where you then come in and review, or be that
Mhm.
final set of eyes. Um, you're avoiding strategic work because you're buried in execution. I feel like you could really talk to this because I know some of your previous experience has been kind of around this, your inability to play strategically, or to be the strategic thinker in your department because you were so bogged down with the busy work, if you will.
Yeah, and it's really the other way around. In my in I've had a couple of recent projects where, I've had to kind of wear numerous roles because the client needed kind of the controller and CFO type of tasks, and limited resources, so kind of the all types of tasks were my responsibilities. But the thing that just I complain about this all the time to my husband and ask him like how he manages his growing ticket lists because
Mhm.
like um, we talked about this in like during month end close when we talk about, oh, it's month end close. That means like, don't bother me. Like
Mhm.
I'm doing this for like I'm stuck in, closing books. And so essentially like nobody remembers like your administrative tasks or like these recurring tasks or these things that are just kind of the normal part of your job. Where I get engaged is, these, hey, help me think through this new partnership, or hey, we're thinking of another purchase and blah blah blah. And so essentially, and that's what my role is. I
Mhm.
am the CFO, I'm there for these things. But um because I was so bogged down with these other administrative things, really my reality would be during the working hours I would be pulled away, from my desk and on these live requests. We're doing this. Okay, this thing is happening. We're having these conversations with the bank this week. This conversation with the investor this week. Prepare these things for us. And then I'm like, okay, it's 6 o'clock. I've had all these meetings. I did all these analyses, and then I'm starting my own work that I had like
Mhm.
routinely scheduled because it's also part of my job with this client. So that has been my reality is avoiding the basically avoiding a lot that if I'm focusing on this request, that means
Mhm.
I'm not answering any of my emails. That means like people are waiting on me. That means like this report is getting compromised from. So yes, that is a terrible reality that I constantly have to battle
Mhm.
and need help with. So absolutely. Um, well, you touched on some really great reasons to delegate, and I want to talk about kind of some reasons not to delegate again because this is like it's a weakness of mine, and so I can talk till the cows come home about examples of where I've failed or a delegation gone wrong. But
Mhm.
essentially. Some examples of when not to delegate. You don't want to delegate something because like you don't understand the scope of work and you just kind of want to get rid of something because and I can say this in many different ways, but like how you how we'll touch on this a little bit further in our topic of when we talk about how to set up your request for success, how to ask, for something to get delegated. But essentially, if you give very vague instructions, you're like, hey, get this done for me or whatever, because you can delegate, as kind of a recurring thing or as a small task. And so you don't want to just, if you are not fully understanding the scope, then definitely don't
Mhm.
ask somebody else to figure out if you can't articulate it correctly. And I remember like I'll jump in with an example right away. One of my failures when I've attempted to delegate something was assuming that the person is familiar with the just the subject at hand on a high
Mhm.
level. And so there were just certain things I didn't explain because to me they were common sense. But then when the work came back, I got like these analysis. Like I saw that AI was a part of helping this person, but
Mhm.
the analyses were like kind of telling me like, well, and here's a W-2 and here's when W-2s are used. And I'm like, oh shoot, okay, like I didn't need that level of this is just a W-2 in the folder. But and so and then I was thinking like, how did we get from it was like I think my request was, here are all the items that we have about this property, and I need to know more about this property or something
Yeah.
like that. And just super vague, but there was everything. Sorry, not W-2, was 1099. But it was like everything under the sun. This person went through every folder and kind of gave me like in a summary of like everything that's in there and why it exists and all of that. And I was just like, oh my God, like I I could have saved this person so much time and clarity on what the heck they're doing
Mhm.
if I just delivered the gosh darn thing
think
in
I
a
I
little bit
think
of a
that's
better way.
something that's missing in delegation. So often I see it. I mean, I have countless stories just like yours where I was not clear either. But I think that this is one of the huge pain points with delegation is you don't have an SOP or you're not clear and you almost have to think about
Mhm,
it as an onboarding, right? You're investing in
mhm,
this person and their success, which
mhm,
means you're losing something in exchange, which is likely your time. And so like any
mhm,
investment, you have to kind of do the ROI on it. If I give an hour of my time to invest in this person to then understand fully what we're doing, take ownership of it moving forward, it may only take them 20 minutes to do it, but they can do it for the next however long and complete
mhm,
their full SOP. And I think so often when delegation comes into play, so many leaders are kind of in that mindset of, okay, I want you to do A and like you said, I want you to pull the 1099s, give me information on this. And they're like, okay, a 1099? Like maybe they don't even know what a 1099
mhm,
is for. That's
mhm,
how we got here is they're
mhm.
going to figure out like, what am I even looking for? And
Yeah.
so when you think of delegation, you can't just think of it. And again, I look at it with my kids too. If I tell them to go, I think I've used this analogy before. If I tell them to go make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, who knows what's coming out, right? Like the first time I teach my kids how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, I'm doing it next to them. All right, guys, let's
Mhm,
go to the pantry. We're going to use our left hand, reach for the bread, pull it
mhm,
down, walk to the counter. And you do this like it's almost painful step by step process of how we do it. And yes, that first time making the peanut butter and jelly sandwich probably is going to take me 20 minutes.
mhm, mhm,
But it's a 20-minute investment in now they know how to do it and they can do it indefinitely. And so by the time they've made 4 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, we've already broke even. And
yeah,
now we're going in a positive direction and I've gotten X amount of time back. And I think delegation has to be looked at in that mindset of there is an upfront investment or an upfront cost
mhm.
for long-term time or whatever.
Yes. Speaking of cost, one of the items I think you lightly touched on like really when you do want to delegate. So, one thing that I really commend one of my prior worked for a uh, prior place, where I was a CFO, and one thing they did really well or understood really well was kind of resource management. And I think this is a nugget that like you and I have talked about, since then. And I think this is a good nugget for our business owners, but essentially, it is you when you are delegating work, when you're like deciding, should I be doing this or should I be delegating this? Obviously, there are multiple questions you should answer, but one of them has to do with cost, and you just brought up cost, and it you really if you're in an executive position and a part of your responsibilities is um, okay, like quarterly lender reporting, this
Mhm,
is every CFO has to do this. There are some quarterly covenants, and you have to submit, financials, maybe some tax returns, whatever you have to submit on a quarterly basis. And this is really like an administrative task, right? And
mhm,
so when you think about this, like you really want to delegate the lowest level of the task that has the lowest cost to it.
mhm,
So, but you want to balance it in a way of like, okay, the financials, your bookkeeper ran the reports, so they're already ready. But like, you might still. It kind of depends on Do you have your controller do it, or do you just have all these tools ready, but you know that you're the front facing person
Mhm.
for this relationship? And so you're like, no, I'm going to actually submit the thing. But then you do everything, you have your team help you every step of the way. So you're not toiling and wasting time and running these reports. You know where to find the reliable work. So essentially the idea is you want to think about, am I costing my company more money or myself? Or like, is
Mhm.
this an opportunity cost of me doing this administrative BS to doing something
Yeah.
more productive, like the analytics or the more kind of uh, what's the word?
The strategic side, but I agree with you.
Yeah.
And I think one other thing to note is that there's responsibility in delegating. So when you delegate like this, one of the companies that I worked for previously, we had a line of credit. And so like you
Hmm.
said, we had covenants with the bank for reporting. We actually had to do it monthly, and
Hmm.
it was a borrowing base certificate. Every bank calls it something different, but ours was a
Hmm.
borrowing base certificate. And yes, to your point, the bookkeeper, the controller was the one to fill that out. And so I passed along, I delegated the worksheet fill out to them,
Hmm.
but there
Hmm.
was still a level of responsibility in reviewing it. And so
Yeah.
it came to my desk, I reviewed it, I checked for accuracy before it went off to the bank, and in that, if something was wrong, it came back on me, and even if I had allowed them to send it directly to the bank when they were
Hmm.
done, most of the time they probably could have. I didn't I actually can think of very few times that I changed something, but,
Hmm.
um there is a responsibility in delegating, and you have to understand as you delegate, are you delegating the responsibility or are you delegating a piece of it? Because
Hmm.
as a leader, and this is another huge pain point that I see so often in leaders is they delegate, they want to take all of the glory for the accomplishments, but they don't
Hmm.
want to take any of the accountability for the misses. And as a
Hmm.
leader, it actually is the other way around. When things go right, it is everyone but you. You give the glory to your team. And
Yep. Yep.
when things go wrong, a good
You
leader
take
takes
that
all of
accountability.
the accountability
Yeah.
and what I this is what I could have done better, or um it's on me. And so I think
Hmm.
that's a very important piece to notate in delegating, is that you have to understand where the responsibility lies even though things are getting delegated. And sometimes you
Absolutely.
delegate and still hold on to responsibility.
Absolutely. You touched on a few nuggets there that I want to just accentuate. Number one, yes, like even if you're delegating let's use this example of, pulling financials, you want to still make sure that, again, you're the relationship, you're the front face. So if somebody prepared something for you, if they saved you time, you still have to look at it. You have to know
Mhm.
what you're submitting. So definitely that. Another thing is, also don't delegate just like the crappy tasks that you don't want to do. Like, oh, this is a pain for me, so you're just gonna be my like, I'm dumping all of my unfavorite things to you. So I really love I forget what the gosh darn square is called. What is it
Johari
called?
window.
Johari window. Okay. And, you gotta make sure that the people who are, cleaning up after you're doing your things you don't enjoy, that they're getting some sort of growth or something out of it as well. And so, again, asking that question, like, does somebody actually enjoy? I really miss one controller that I worked with who was so wonderful, and she complimented me so well. She knew that I like hated 10-minute tasks, but she actually loved them. So I loved priority setting meetings with her because I'd be like, okay, this is stressing me out. And she's like, oh my God, I love this. Can I take this off of your plate? And I'm like, yes. And so we
Please.
we would just and then I would do, something bigger or more annoying because I love like the tasks where I'm stuck for hours and I'm just
Mhm.
like finishing like a building something big. I love those things and she hated those.
Mhm.
So yes, definitely want to keep in mind whom you're delegating to, and if they're just constantly picking up your stuff for you, or if they're growing in picking up some of these requests of
Yeah,
yours.
I agree with everything that you said. Delegating is just it's a little bit of an art.
Yes.
And or a dance, and you have to be mindful of that art or dance. And so one question that I get asked frequently, or I have asked frequently, is when should I start thinking about delegating, or when is it time to delegate, or how
Mhm.
do I know when to delegate? And um I would say that this again is a little bit of an art. There's not a specific, uh trigger, but we talked about a few things at the beginning. But does this require me specifically is a great question to ask.
Mhm.
Am I the only one that can do this? And one
Mhm.
thing for me is, I am a firm believer in cross training. I'm a firm believer in SOPs because while as a CFO, I have roles, responsibilities, fiduciary responsibilities. Um, if for some reason I was on a flight that went down or got into a car accident, or, just a freak accident happens, someone needs to be able to step into my role seamlessly. I don't care where you're at in any business, any organization. You need to be able to have that ease that someone could step in the event of an emergency.
Mhm.
And so great question to ask is, does this require me specifically? If the answer is no, that's a great way to start thinking, how do I delegate this? And if it does require you specifically, I would highly recommend you have an SOP on how to get from point A to point B on that specific task, because most of the controllers I've worked with could do what I do if they needed to step in. They would fumble a little
Mhm.
bit, or it would take them a little bit more time to get through and understand the nuts and bolts. But they are highly adept people that could take an SOP and get to the end if it was there. Another thing to ask is this repeatable? And I touched on this a few minutes ago. If it's repeatable, is there a way that we can have another set of fresh eyes look at it and see if there's a more efficient way to do it? Or is there a way to automate parts or all of the process to make it a little bit easier? Um, I'm a huge advocate for growth. I have been notorious for probably believing in people way before they have the skills, aptitude, tenure, or before they believe in themselves. And I think a lot of that comes from, my story and people
Yeah.
believing in me
Mhm.
way before I believed in myself. And so
Mhm.
asking questions like, is this something that I could teach, or is there an opportunity for someone else to grow? And
Mhm.
so often as leaders, we put our we put our people in boxes, and we kind of self-determine what they are or are not capable of. And when we pass things along to them, a lot of times we not only surprise them, but we surprise ourselves in what they can do. What is the risk if it is done imperfectly? I probably am one of those ones that thinks less on this. Um, I Before I left the corporate world, something that my employees communicated they really appreciated about me was that I gave them room to fail. And that is something that I'm very prideful of, that that's what they took away from my leadership, is that they felt safe to fail. And when you
Mhm.
look in business, there are things that happen that are huge failures, but at the end of the day, I looked at things like if I passed over, wiring initiation to someone else, what's the worst that can happen? There's a check and balance. Someone else has to approve it. And if they initiate it and this person approves it, what's the worst that can happen? They overdraw the bank account. I've done that. In my early career as a
Mhm.
bookkeeper, I over I overdraw a checking account. So you start to look at what is the worst that can happen? And if that worst case happens, is there a solution or can it be rectified? We've all
Mhm.
made mistakes, myself included. And so not allowing people to make mistakes because they won't do it perfectly, I don't think is a reason to like prevent delegation. And the final thing that I would kind of pose is what decisions um what decision rights does the person need in order to do this? And so if we talk about the wiring situation, we've talked about this a lot, dual controls. There should never be one person initiating a payment and approving a payment. And
Mhm.
so if we allow them to initiate the payment, what rights do they need to have? It's probably different than view only access or statement access, making sure they have the right permissions in the bank, but then also making sure that they don't have too many permissions to
Mhm.
ensure that those dual controls are in place. So I think that gives our listeners kind of a good jumping off point to kind of start. But again, I continuously go back to that Johari window. It's a great place to start if you are questioning whether you should delegate and if you're B, questioning what to get delegate. It will give you that clear kind of path on this box is what you should delegate. And then you can kind of put together that plan of
Yeah, you
how and when.
you touched on a couple of notes in this and your earlier comment that I forgot to comment on, but essentially, you touched on one good one where um, you know you don't want to delegate your entire kind of you might ask somebody for temporary help, maybe a one-time help, but you don't want to kind of delegate your whole responsibility away, especially certain responsibilities that, I mean, we talked about what you can, but you're still on the
Mhm.
surface before it leaves the door. You're still responsible for it, for verifying it. But you want to make sure that you really are owning the things that are, like, it, that are core to your role, right? Like, so
Mhm.
as a CFO, like, I am not going to delegate my analytical and recommendations and all of that, all of these conversations that I have with the owner as like their right hand of, here's where you're at, here's what we can do about it, here are
Mhm.
your options. But I will delegate everything for me to make to basically have the most accurate data at hand as I'm before I start analyzing. I will count on my controller, like, hey, I need these books cleaned up. Like, I want to make sure I'm working with the latest data, and but I'm not gonna then close the month and do that part. Like, there are certain sections to divvy out,
Mhm.
but you just touched on some important ones where, like, certain things are not a good idea for you. Like, a wire may make sense to delegate. In some occasions, it might not. If you're like, if the person is not familiar with even the conduct of, you have to check you have to call and verify the account before, like, when you're
Mhm.
delegating something, you want to make sure that if it's something that has a risk of if the ball, to your point of, like, what's the worst that can happen if I don't do this, or if somebody else does it. Well, maybe somebody else doing it is okay, but to your point, then you want to make sure that they have all the instructions of, like, this is what we do
Agreed.
first, this is what we do second, because then, to your way earlier point, because if something drops in this delegation step, then it's going to be you who is dealing with those consequences. So if you are delegating, make sure that you give the person all the tools to succeed, and make sure that you're mitigating your risks by delegating as well. So
Yeah.
yes, you touched on some great gems there, and with that, I want to kind of segue into, you've made the decision, you are going to delegate. How does that conversation look like, so you get what you want and you're setting that person up for success? So first thing is, you want, when you're asking somebody to do something, you want to make sure to uh, you want to make sure they're following your request thoroughly. What does, can you get this done? What does success look like? What does completion look like? You have to be very, very specific. Again, I totally failed this when I like, hey, here's everything under the sun about this property. I want to know more about this property. Totally bad direction given. So I got everything under the sun. And so, um, explaining the why. This one is something I get really good feedback on. Is when I explain like why I'm asking a person to do something, they are always like, "Thank you so much for explaining," because
Mhm.
then number one, you kind of avoid sometimes like people's ideas run wild if they're like, I don't want to do this. And then they're like thinking about all these different, like, well, I don't like, what's the way that I don't have to do this one thing? So if you just explain why they have to do a
Yeah.
certain thing, will engage them more, and hopefully they'll understand more why they're doing it and how. And then define the level of authority that you're giving with this task. Are you saying, um, I need you to research X, Y, and Z and then make a recommendation? If that's the request, state it plainly, because if you like, for example, let's say I put some thoughts together and I'm like, I I need help with this. I don't know if my ideas are good. I Can you please look through this? If I say, "Can you please look through this?" then, the person might look at it and be like, "Well, looks great." Because
Yeah.
I didn't say like, "Hey, I need you to like pinpoint all of my fallacies here," or, like, if I don't give them the specific objective, I should not be expecting, them
Mhm.
to read my mind. So,
Yeah.
um, definitely telling them like, what are they doing with it, and do they have authority to, am I crossing over? Am I just, you really have to define exactly what you're asking, or, say, own this completely. I know that this is a thing that we have to be responsible for, but I don't know what that entails. I need you to own it from A to Z and then teach me. But
Mhm.
you have to explicitly state that. So,
Yep.
let's see. And yeah, here's one that, as I'm kind of going through, how this conversation should look like, I again am just envisioning the conversations that I didn't have in the past when I've delegated. And a part of it, I remember just completely setting up my controller for failure. I mentioned, in our training, when there was some room for to take on more responsibilities, just kind of mentioning again things on a high level, like, hey, I did say I want you to own these
Mhm.
schedules, but I assumed that, that it was known. It's uh, property tax payment
Mhm.
schedules, insurance schedule, and so some other schedule. But and so, kind of on a high level, it was understood. But where I went wrong is, saying own this 100% with thinking that it was very clear what it meant owning them, that it meant, tracking policies, updating expiration dates, keeping
Mhm.
the schedules updated. And I remember, like, in my own world, I thought, because one thing. when you're delegating, you want to make sure that you give this person like ownership and trust and autonomy to own this, in their way. But if you're constantly like breathing down their neck and like, oh, is this done, is this
Mhm.
done, then you're not really letting them own it. But I made the opposite mistake of like giving too much distance. So I mentioned it the first time, like in the way beginning,
Mhm.
but to be fair, everything else was relevant and important during these discussions as well,
Mhm.
and then my way of kind of keeping distance, but still reminding was through emails, like when there's an insurance conversation and I'm like dropping a nugget. This is where we need to update the schedule, blah, blah, blah. Or, dropping little nuggets.
Mhm.
But what I didn't realize was that this person was so overwhelmed, overtasked to begin
Mhm.
with, and so they were not even getting through my emails, or get very surface scanning just to get
Mhm.
the job done, or to get through the month, whatever. And I was failing this person because in our one-on-ones and the weekly, like that's the prime time to then bring it up, like, hey, there have been a few conversations about these things. I want to make sure that these schedules are in the back of your mind. And I never did that, so I think I'm dropping hints in emails. These emails are not getting looked over. This person doesn't even know that they're failing. And that's where like
Yeah.
I majorly owned my F up there, because like I did not give any tools to succeed. In my mind, I dropped the right hints, but like when it mattered,
Mhm.
in the one-on-one conversations, never brought up. So I'll let you rip me
No,
apart there.
no, I'm not gonna rip you apart. I agree with that, and we've talked about this so frequently that clear expectations are so important, whether it comes to delegation, hiring someone, uh, making decisions. Like clear expectations are so important. And I'll actually tell you one of my biggest pet peeves is just that when something has been tasked to me and there is a very clear deliverable and there's this check-in like 5 days before, like how's that,
Mm,
how are we doing with this, or like
mhm,
you've given me a deliverable, and there's a difference between checking in to make sure like you don't need help or
mhm,
you're not waiting on me for something, but there are some great task management tools out there that can track progress of these types of things. But
mhm.
if we agreed on a delivery of the 15th, then I don't want you breathing down my neck the 11th, 12th, 13th, and 14th. Like,
Yeah.
we'll come to the table on the 15th, and I either have to explain why I failed to meet the deliverable,
Mhm.
or um or we go through whatever that deliverable is. And I think that it's the
Yeah.
same on the other side. If you give a deliverable and you say the 15th, then you need to trust that it's going to be ready on the 15th unless they've come
Mm.
to you for additional questions. So
Yeah.
I agree with
Yeah.
that. I'm not a micromanager in that way, and it's probably why it's one of my biggest annoyances. Um, but I would say that that's one of the biggest delegation mistakes is
Mhm.
that you delegate, but you have not fully released it. And if you can't fully release it, then the question would be, should you have delegated it? But delegating too late when everything is already urgent is another thing. And
Mhm.
I think a lot of times that's where that SOP or breakdown in communication on, go gather the 1099s for me, and then you get this whole
Mhm.
gamut of information that you didn't
Mhm.
need. You probably delegated too late and it became an urgent thing, and so information and delegation on a timely manner. Giving vague
For sure.
instructions like you said, like no one's going to do it perfectly, but the more information, it goes back to that investment, right? You have to invest on the front end to see the
Mhm.
ROI on the back end. Um, this one, taking work back at the first sign of struggle is so disrespectful, actually. I think I said this in the last episode. I went on a soapbox on disrespectfulness, but it is so disrespectful when you take something back because someone is showing a little bit of struggle. It is demoralizing. It's dehumanizing. And I just think if you were to put yourself in those shoes, did you do it perfectly the first time, or is there something that you've been given that someone gave you that space to fail, to struggle, etc.?
Mhm.
We learn so much in the struggle. I firmly
Mhm.
believe that. We learn more in the struggle than we do in the success. And so taking things away from someone when they're in that stage of growth and learning is just, it's very disrespectful to me. Delegating tasks but not authority. So this I think you talked about this on a couple previous episodes where they were doing the busy work but just couldn't make the actual decision. And
Mhm.
so when it comes to like the wiring, you made some great points, and yes, you need to have the appropriate controls in place for those permissions, but if you are going to give them, the authority to send a wire, like truly give them the authority to do it. um, Delegating to the same reliable person every single time. This kind of goes in conjunction um, with being vague about instructions and taking it back at the first sign of weakness. Yes, you're going to have someone that you just know they're going to do it. They're not going to bring it back to me until it's done right. They're going to do it probably the way that I would want it done or want to see the final project. But you're again limiting other assets around you. They may not be your strongest, most expensive, most valuable assets, but you only create that if you delegate to them as well, right? Like if we want to appreciate those employees, giving stuff to them that again, maybe they surprise themselves, which in turn surprises you. Failing to explain priorities. I feel like we have hit this nail on the head, but really explaining your expectation priorities.
And
And
the due date also, you
yes.
touched on this earlier, but, if you don't set it, then don't expect, the right priority on it. So you touched on it on, like, checking up a little too early on you. Well, in that example, like, great expectations were set, but sometimes they're not. And so if you're
Mhm.
on a receiving end of the delegation, like, find out when is it due because you might be putting it at the top of your priority because it hasn't been mentioned, but, the person might have given you 2 weeks or something.
Exactly. The final one that I would say is, and this is again, like I'm speaking to myself in this because this was really like the pivot of me learning delegation was not a weakness, but I would all the time confuse I can do it faster myself with I should do it myself. And
Mhm,
I prevented so much delegation that would make the company more efficient, that would make me more efficient, that would create more value for me, my department, and the company had I just done it. But I had this mindset of I can do it faster myself or I can do it right myself. And a lot of the lack in that was not having clear expectations, not having clear deliverables, not having a way to clearly communicate what I wanted or needed. And had I had
mhm.
that, it would have been so much smoother. So I think getting out of your own head that you probably can do it faster yourself. You probably will do it your way yourself, but what else can you do in replacement of this? But
Totally.
I've talked a lot about delegation and not being a weakness, and I've also talked about as a leader we should take accountability for all that goes wrong and we should give praise for everything that goes right. The reality is, in being in a leadership position, your stakeholders see you as a success. And I try to do everything in my power to say, this was my people, this was not me. At least it wasn't
Mhm,
me solo. I couldn't have done it without,
mhm,
this group of
mhm.
people. But your stakeholders are always going to see you as the driver of the success. And so I want to talk, or I want you to talk a little bit about how when you delegate, how that actually makes you a stronger leader or, can multiply your leadership abilities.
Absolutely. Well, as we've kind of been drilling down, delegating is not it's not just dumping your work on somebody. It really creates that capacity for you. You had an opportunity cost on doing something great with your time, with your talents. And
Mhm.
so when everybody has kind of their workflows defined and everything is working in a well-oiled machine, when the information gets to you, then you're most efficient with it, and it helps you be that leader that you're meant to be. So not only as we talked about, does it free you up, from the opportunity cost to work on something greater, it it also shows you, this is your practice of building a team. When you are delegating to others,
Mhm.
you're creating that capacity in the team. You're letting your team practice other skills that they will need when they maybe step into your role, in a couple of years. So it's not just helping you; it empowers everybody when it's done in a healthy way.
Mhm.
One thing that just totally goes into my mind as I'm talking about, healthy delegation. I want to ask you if you've ever encountered this, because I've encountered this way too many times in my experience, being typically, one of the few females who is surrounded by a lot
Mhm.
of males, and kind of being just more organized than them. Just because it comes
Mhm.
with a position, you have to be organized, right?
Mhm.
But one thing that I just find so gosh darn annoying is, the kind of the partners, the owners would then delegate their bitch work to me, aka like, hey, help me pick out, sign up for the benefits for me and all of that stuff. And I was more forgiving to owners,
Yeah.
but when just like other executives were like, you do my bitch work, I'm like, absolutely not.
Mhm.
Because number one, like, benefits, it's like I hate going through the benefit selection just as much as
Mhm.
anybody else does. And I'm like, it's not the answer that's right for me is not going to be right for
Mhm.
you. Like, maybe you're looking for the highest deductible because the business is like paying for you or whatever, where I might be looking for the lowest deductible or whatever, so we have different goals. And so
Yeah.
one of the things I just hate, that I think probably maybe some of our listeners who are also kind of in that exec sphere, is that sometimes the shit rolls down to
Yeah.
our laps. That
It does. It does. I have a funny story. So last week I've mentioned to you and it's pretty public at this point, but I'm doing a run for my local city council. And in that it's networking and meeting with officials and what have you. And we have an adjacent city to where I am and she is actually a councilwoman for that adjacent city. And we went and had coffee and we were, just talking about some of the struggles of being a woman in some of these elected positions. And she laughed because she had said, one of the things that was really hard for me to get over when I got into this position was that I would come and and it would be like almost insinuated like, "Hey, could you take notes or minutes for the meeting?" And she would politely say, "No, I didn't bring my notebook today," or "You have your notebook and pen. You can take minutes or meetings. Like, that's not my role." And so I just laughed because it doesn't matter where you're at. I just think there are some gender identity roles that kind of get passed down like that.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
instead of we've also talked about this and I haven't gotten any hate yet, um but there are ways that you can handle those situations and being abrasive and just saying like, "How dare you even ask me that type of question?" Or like, "How
Mhm,
dare you even consider thinking that I would do it and not asking Joe Schmo over here?" There's a way that you can set healthy boundaries and
mhm.
we're equals. I'm not going to help you with that because to your point, my objectives and goals out of this would be very different than your goals and objectives out of this.
Mhm.
Don't think it's appropriate for me to help you in that. Or setting boundaries like, I'm an exec along with you. And so if we need someone to take minutes, maybe we bring in one of our assistants to be that note taker. So there are ways to kind of handle those situations with healthy boundaries that will elevate us as strong female leaders instead of bringing animosity to having
Mhm.
female leaders at the table.
That's such a relevant example with the note taking. I have been there as well, and actually, one in one of Mel Robbins's books, she talks about this. She was talking with a person she was trying to help kind of get out of the situation, and this person was complaining that they're constantly like, they're the go-to person for the notes.
Mhm.
But she made such a great point of like, well, this person also was like known for taking copious notes at every meeting. And this is something I'm very guilty of as well, because like in meetings, like my fingers just type what I'm hearing. And this is because I'm nervous. Like I think goodness for the AI note takers now, because now I rely on them, and now I can be more present. But I'd always be so nervous that I would miss like something, how a person said something, that I just kind of like almost am not even used to not be fully
Mhm.
present, because like I'm just kind of like there to take the notes, and then only after the meetings I'd be like, oh, interesting. I didn't catch that the first time. But to that point, like what Mel Robbins was recommending is it when you're in a meeting and you don't want to show others, signal to others that you are the note taker,
Mhm.
you take your notes, take a few, like jot down, something touched on a nugget, like a little bullet point that will help you reference what it was later. It's basically like a little pin for you. You're not there to, narrate the whole conversation that happened. And and then the more the and that's one easy way of getting out of it without having to have
Yeah.
that like, well, hey, I'm not going to take your damn notes for you, like, is just don't sign up for it. You just jot your own thing down, and
Yeah.
like, yeah, those are my only notes. So, but
Yep.
such a relevant example for sure.
Yeah. I love it. Well, should we start to land the plane?
We shall start it, my friend. But I have a before we get into our questions,
Okay.
I have a question for you that like I just thought of you when I saw this one video. And you have to be honest with me, please.
Okay.
You're very sweet in the fact that you've never like made me feel less than because I'm not this way, but I want to know if you're familiar with this concept and
Okay.
if you've ever used the word. Are you familiar with the term NARP?
NARP.
Mhm.
NARP.
Mhm.
I don't think so. I know narc.
That's good. No, no,
Uh,
NARP.
Okay.
So, um, and I'm glad because I think you're too sweet to label people that way. But maybe you'll be like, oh no, I have a different name for this.
Okay.
But essentially, it's a non-athletic regular person, which is a term, which is a term that like I think it came from some college. Some specific college, and I don't know if what kind of team it was, but that's kind of the way that these folks are referred to as, the me's of the world,
Oh my
and it
gosh.
came up. I started seeing it more in videos recently, and then I just saw like where it stemmed from, and I'm like, that's so mean. And then I'm like, oh, I need to know. Does Cash know this? Does her community use this?
I don't know that one. No, I think because uh I have been known to be, like, not the nicest person on occasions. I mean, haven't we all? But yes. But when it comes to, like, athletics and physicality and, like, bettering yourself physically, I have never like shamed people in that way because if you're trying, like, you should
Mhm.
have credit for that. And so
Mhm.
I actually was that person, like, through all my, like, athletic career and even as a young adult. We have a home gym now, so I don't really go to the
Mhm.
gym. But when I would go to the gym and people would just, like, you know, be judgy of like the the fat guy or
Mhm.
the lady that was only walking at 2 miles an hour. Like I was the one that was piping in being like, "At least they're here. Like
Mhm.
at least they're
Mhm.
trying. Who are you
Mhm.
to judge them?" And
Yeah,
so I
totally.
just when we live in a society that has like an epidemic around metabolic disease and like
Mhm.
obesity, I just don't have any tolerance for shaming people that are willing to try. And
Absolutely.
that extends
I'm glad
into
to hear that.
athletics. And
Yep.
so if you have 2 feet on a basketball court, like at least you're trying and that's that's worth something. So no, I
Totally.
haven't heard of that. And if I had, I probably would be the mean person to those
To
people.
stand up for us NARPs. Thank you, Cash.
But here's okay, so that must have been like we've talked about how we're not scripted, but we do have like a guideline and notes, and we have like been taking turns on what the funny question was, and so your the funny question like note says word meanings, and so I'm like, oh, she has the question, and so
I do, I
was
do.
you do have the question?
I do,
Okay.
I do. Okay, so Uh, one of the things that makes my life extra colorful is, I come from a different country. I think we've been over this before,
Mhm,
but there are certain words that, like, I just have never heard before, like in the contexts that I've been
mhm.
in. And so there's certain words that I like should know as a grown ass adult that I'm like, wait, what's that? Like, and or sometimes like I have a completely different uh understanding of what
Mhm.
something means. And so I swear, like, there are just so many instances where I'm like, oh my goodness, this is embarrassing. But one of the recent ones that I have learned, that I have gotten wrong for like my entire uh relationship with my husband, which is like 15 years or something. So um all right. So my stepdaughter is into theater and things like that, and so a lot of her childhood was, plays and different theater schools and things like that, little musicals and all of that. And so that's a fact. We're putting that away for a moment. Another fact is my family. I'm like not a huge fan of movies these days, but
Mhm,
one thing we were really into is like watching, all the Avengers and all of that stuff when she was younger,
mhm,
and kind of doing like these marathons on these uh, various movies that she liked, like hero movies and stuff.
mhm,
But then, like, every time, so those are 2 separate facts, and in my brain, they're connected. So, um, every time that my husband would be like, "Oh, hey, like this, this anime or whatever, like this thing, it's now live action." What I thought this entire time when he said live action, I thought that it was like Broadway or like Disney on Ice, like live action where it's like a live like play. And so like I was thinking that like, wow, there's a lot of like live action stuff out there. Like, wow, even this has a lot of wow. And so like it was like maybe 3 weeks ago. I found out we got
That's
together
funny.
on my stepdaughter's birthday, and we somehow were talking about live action, and I just came to the understanding that it does not mean like Broadway and that it's like a play, but
Oh my
that
gosh,
it's
that's
just a
funny.
regular movie. So anyway,
We,
anything like that with you?
yes. So the first thing that comes to mind, I'll tell you that. But we have 3 kids and they're still like they're not grown. Like range in age from 6 to 12. So my husband is one of the most intelligent people that I know. Like his vocabulary, just sometimes I look at him like, how do you even know that word? And then I have to go like look it up and I'm like, that's like a word from like the 1800s. How do you know that? So he's just like this walking dictionary. And I am like on the flip side of that. Like I'll say like communion when I really mean communal or like just like I've and he'll look at me like, "What are you talking about?" But with kids, we have like, we'll say something and now our kids are especially our 2 younger ones are at the age where they're like, "What does that mean?" Like this weekend I used laissez-faire in something. My daughter is like, "What does that mean?" But I will never forget this. My husband, we still laugh about this. So it was probably like early in our relationship, so like 20 years ago. Not a car girl at all, married to a total, like, not grease monkey, but he knows everything about cars.
Mhm.
We're driving down the road and we passed a truck that on the side, like down by their door, it said like 2500 HD. And so I was like, does HD mean high definition? And he just like looked at me like mortified, like, you cannot be serious right now. And I'm like, seriously, like there's HD TVs and now like HD's on the truck. And he was like, babe, it means heavy duty. And so like now, like to this day, like when we see like a HD truck, we still laugh. But yes, I have so many of those situations where I'm like,
I
Cash,
love it.
you
I
are
love it.
some sort of idiot. But yes,
I'm
I
sure he doesn't say that, but no, that's something that I would have totally made as well. I think somebody told me what it stands for. I probably was like, "What does this mean?" So, yeah.
yeah, I love it. Well,
Love
my
it, love
friends, I
it.
hope that you take something away from this and that you are able to find something to delegate in a meaningful and strategic way this week. Until next time. Delegation is not about doing less, it's about leading at the right level. The goal is not to remove yourself from the work entirely. The goal is to build a system where the right people own the right work, where expectations are clear, and where accountability does not depend on you holding every detail in your own hands. Because when delegation is done well, it does more than free up your calendar. It strengthens your team, it builds confidence, it creates ownership, and it gives you, as the leader, the space to focus on the decisions, relationships, and priorities that only you can carry. So, as you think about what it is on your plate right now, ask yourself, what am I holding on to because it truly needs me? And what am I holding on to because I have not yet created the structure for someone else to own it? That question may be the starting point for your next level of leadership. Thank you for going past the balance sheet with us. If this episode had resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with those who could also benefit from these discussions.